It was still dark when I got to the bakery, the smell of yesterday's dough lingering faintly in the cold morning air. My key slipped easily into the back door. At least he hadn't changed that. But before I could even set my bag down behind the counter, my phone buzzed with a flurry of Facebook Messenger pings. "Hey, can you respond to the cake order by noon?" one read. "Why'd you leave the customer group?" another asked. I frowned, opened the business page on Instagram to check messages, and was smacked with the pale, clinical words that made my stomach clench. Incorrect password. I typed it again, slowly. Same rejection. Tried the bakery's email login. Locked. Then the Facebook group. My name wasn't even on the member list anymore. Through the front windows, the glass reflecting that strip of orange before sunrise, I spotted him, leaning casually against a stack of flour bags, chatting and laughing with our egg supplier, as though the world was just fine. My heart pounded. The kind of fast that isn't just anger, but panic. Those accounts weren't just social media to me. They were years of my work. I built them from 800 scattered followers into a community of nearly 12,000 loyal customers and local foodies. I posted the behind-the-scenes kneading videos, answered every inquiry at 11 p.m., coaxed glowing reviews from shy customers who never praised anyone publicly. I stepped outside for a second, the cold biting my cheeks hard enough to jolt me. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe Instagram had done that weird two-factor thing. But why was I booted from the Facebook group? That required manual action. Someone deliberately removing me. And here was the thing I couldn't explain yet. I couldn't shake the sense that he knew I was seeing all this, and that his grinning with the supplier was for my benefit. I almost marched right in then, but my thumb hovered over my mom's contact instead. No point. She'd just say we'd sort it all after breakfast. And that bought him hours. Hours in which he could control the voice of the bakery, answer journalists, post whatever story he wanted. I needed to know exactly when and why he'd locked me out before I walked through that door. That meant confronting someone other than him first, which is exactly what I decided to do next. Shall I write the next chapter? By the time I forced myself inside, the usual comfort of warm ovens and the yeasty scent of rising dough felt alien, like stepping into someone else's kitchen. He gave me that casual nod, the kind meant to imply nothing was wrong, but his eyes slid over me like I was just another employee arriving for shift. I ignored him and went straight to the apron hooks, slipping mine on and fastening it in jerky mechanical motions. I kept my phone in my pocket, gripping it like a secret weapon. My first call would be to Marta, one of our morning baristas and the quiet center of bakery gossip. She was already pulling espresso shots, face flushed from steam. When the supplier left, I sidled over. "Marta," I murmured, "have you been in the Facebook group this morning?" She blinked. Yeah? He posted the new cinnamon bun special about 20 minutes ago. Why?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "And, did you notice anything missing?" Her eyes darted to him, then back to me. She looked uncomfortable. "Your admin badge is gone. Thought maybe it was on purpose. He said you were stepping back?" The words hit like a slap. Stepping back? My chest burned. The kind of burn you get when you swallow humiliation and rage at the same time. "What exactly did he say?" I pressed. She lowered her voice. "Just that with your mom needing more care, you didn't have time for online stuff, so he took over to ease the load. Everyone thought you told him to." "That isn't true, right?" I didn't answer immediately because I spotted him across the room deliberately busying himself with a sack of sugar. But his ear was tipped toward us. That fake obliviousness made my skin crawl. The stakes slammed into me all at once. This wasn't just a tech lockout. If customers and staff believed I'd willingly handed over control, He could rewrite everything before I even touched a keyboard. Every story about my family's recipes, every post that kept my grandmother's photo in the spotlight, all of it could be reframed to orbit him. And with Mom too worn down to intervene, this false narrative could take root fast. I realized in that moment that if I didn't act today, the bakery's future, my place in it, might be gone for good. But how could I confront him without looking like the emotional daughter he was clearly painting me to be? I thought I had a plan, but the first red flag came quicker than I expected. Shall I write the next chapter? It started barely 20 minutes later, in the most mundane way, a tray of sticky buns coming out of the oven. I'd been plating them in silence, trying to focus on the steady motions so my mind wouldn't spiral, when he strolled past and glanced at my work. "You're overfilling the glaze cups," he said lightly, not even stopping. "No wonder our supply orders are off." It was innocuous enough for anyone overhearing to think it was just a casual note, but it landed with that familiar sting, the way he could layer a critique with implication, like I was careless, incapable. Just weeks ago, he'd been bragging about my presentation skills to customers. Then, as if he hadn't driven the point in enough, he circled back, picked up my phone from beside the counter without asking, squinted at the screen, and said, "You don't need to worry about those messages anymore. I've got them covered." He set it down again, but not before his thumb had swiped up and my business page shortcut was visibly gone from the home screen. "Why would you—" I started, but he cut me off with a smile that didn't meet his eyes. "Relax. You're too wound up lately. Let me handle the front-facing stuff. You stick to what you're best at. People's skills aren't everyone's strength." There it was, the first micro-injustice of the day, small enough to appear harmless, but direct enough to chip away at me in front of staff. Marta's head dipped instantly. She busied herself with the milk steamer, like if she made enough noise, she could pretend she hadn't heard. I chewed my tongue hard enough to taste copper, rather than give him the satisfaction of an outburst. But my mind was racing back, connecting dots. The time he deleted a post I'd made about my grandmother, saying, "Customers prefer clean visuals without too much text." The public typo correction he made in one of my captions just to prove I'd missed an accent mark. The weekend he forgot to invite me to the tasting event with the magazine editor. Back then, I'd told myself it was just sloppiness, mismatched priorities. Now, the pattern clicked into place. He'd been slowly editing me out for months, turning my work into his, my grandmother's legacy into his narrative. But if I called him out now, he'd gaslight me in front of everyone. I knew how well he played that game. Instead, I decided to watch closely for his next slip, because catching him in the right moment, with his words hanging in the air for others to hear, might be the only way to break through the illusion. And that chance was about to arrive sooner than I thought, in full public view. Shall I write the next chapter? It happened that Saturday, when the bakery was at its loudest, grinders humming, chairs scraping, the low roar of conversations mixing with the smell of cinnamon and espresso. I was at the counter pulling cappuccinos when I noticed a couple standing near the pastry case, phone cameras trained directly on him. He was over by the bread racks, holding one of our sourdough loaves, gesturing animatedly like a seasoned showman. That in itself wasn't strange. He loved a crowd. But then I caught the tail end of his sentence. "It's my grandmother's recipe. We've kept it unchanged for decades." My throat went dry. His grandmother? The loaf he was clutching was my grandmother's. Bread. The recipe she wrote in a flour-stained notebook when she was 17 and brought here from Ukraine. She taught my mom, who taught me, while he hadn't so much as shaped a boule until last year. The couple nodded eagerly, snapping photos as if they'd discovered some charming local legend. I leaned closer, trying to hear, my heart slamming harder. "And these cinnamon butter braids?" the woman asked. He smirked like it was his cue. "That's one of my proudest creations. They've really put us on the map. I nearly dropped the saucer in my hand. That braid was the very recipe that had blown up our Instagram last year. The one I'd spent months perfecting after Grandma passed. Exactly to keep her name alive. Something in me snapped, but not into rage. It was sharper than that. Cold, deliberate clarity. If I barged in then, he'd play the same card. I was just overprotective, dramatic. But now he was lying to customers in broad daylight. Witnesses. And, in a moment of fortune I couldn't ignore, the male half of the couple spoke up. "Funny, I read on your Instagram last year that the braid was your daughter's specialty." I held my breath, willing the man to lock eyes with me across the room. Instead, he pivoted without missing a beat. "She helps with the baking, but the creative direction? That's me. Always has been." There it was. Smooth revision, cementing the lie. I saw Marta glance over from the espresso machine, her brows tugged together. Customers might forget an ad, but they remember stories. If his story took root, mine, my mom's, my grandmother's, would vanish. Walking home that night, I realized something brutal. I couldn't just wait for another public slip-up. Each day gave him more control over the narrative. I'd have to propose a fix and force him to agree before the bakery's entire identity was in his hands. But if I was wrong, if I misplayed this, I'd be the one written off as unstable and bitter. Still, I knew what I had to say to him next. Shall I write the next chapter? The next morning, I made sure to get to the bakery before he did. The ovens were already humming, and Marta was wiping down counters as the golden light poured in from the front windows. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged the proposal I had drafted on my laptop. Plain, straightforward, professional. No accusations, no emotion he could twist. When he walked in, smelling of cologne and carrying his ever-present thermos, I was ready. "I'd like a few minutes before we open," I said evenly. He hesitated, clearly surprised, but shrugged and sat opposite me at the small table by the window. "I think we need to split the customer-facing responsibilities," I began. "Joint access to the accounts, rotating spokespersons for events, a shared content calendar so nothing gets posted without both of us seeing it first." The words felt rehearsed because they were. I'd practiced them in my head the whole night, making sure there was no place for him to paint me as irrational. He leaned back, took a slow sip from his thermos, and gave me what he thought was a reassuring smile. "That's interesting. But the thing is, password sharing creates confusion. We'd risk double posting, too many voices. You know how customers like consistency." I didn't flinch. "Then let's just agree on certain days when each of us controls the account," I countered. He tilted his head. "Honestly, I think you've been under a lot of stress with your mom lately. You're a great baker, one of the best I've seen. But why overload yourself with PR? I can take that weight for you." The way he said it, as though he was doing me a loving favor, made my skin crawl. I could see the tactic. Offer me relief so he could maintain his unchallenged control. "That's not an overload," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It's part of my role. My grandmother intended the business stories and recipes to be preserved. That's my job to safeguard." His eyes hardened just for a second before his smile returned. "Let's talk later. I think there's a cinnamon order waiting." He dodged me completely. Worst of all, he'd done it with witnesses, flipping the script so I appeared stubborn, resistant to help. The proposal sat on the table, untouched, like a child's doodle he had no intention of valuing. Walking back to the prep counter, my stomach sank. He wasn't going to hand me control because I asked nicely. He was counting on me to either back down or explode in a way he could use against me, which meant my next move had to be sharper and built on undeniable proof, the kind that would make him look like the manipulator in front of the right people. And by the end of the week, that proof landed straight in my lap. Shall I write the next chapter? It came from an unlikely source. Nina, one of our former pastry assistants who now worked at a cafe down the street. I hadn't spoken to her in months when her name lit up on my phone one evening. "Hey," she whispered, as if we were still in the same break room, avoiding being overheard. "I don't know if you heard what he's been saying, but I thought you should see this." A second later, my screen filled with screenshots from the bakery's private staff group chat, the one I hadn't known even existed. I scrolled through, my pulse hammering harder with each green message bubble. She's stepped back from online stuff to care for her mom. I'll be the point of contact for all press inquiries now. Best for the brand if we have one consistent voice. My stomach turned. Aside from the fact that I'd never stepped back, the deliberate repetition of the same clean little lie to multiple people made it obvious this was a campaign, not a misunderstanding. The kicker was a post from 3 days ago. "Let's keep this internal. She can be a bit sensitive about her role." I could almost hear the tone he'd used, that faux patient pity that worked like acid under the skin. I called Nina immediately. "Who else has seen this?" I demanded. "Pretty much everyone who still works weekends," she said. "He started the group after you got locked out of the Facebook admin spot, said it was just easier this way." A flash of memory seared through me. My mom telling me, not 2 nights ago, "He's just trying to help. Maybe you were too quick in your emails." That's when I realized he'd been feeding her this same narrative, which explained her sudden quiet alignment with him lately. I thanked Nina and made her promise to keep the exchange between us for now. My mind was already structuring the pieces. The lockout, the lies, the public credit theft, now the overhead proof of deliberate misrepresentation. It was more than enough to challenge him, but timing would be everything. If I went at him when we were alone, he'd twist it into a private spat. I needed to corner him with witnesses he respected enough not to smear completely. But who'd hear every word? I thought of the head baker, Ivan, who'd worked under my grandmother and remembers every ugly fight over the years. His loyalty was still to the family that founded the bakery. If Ivan heard the truth in real time, I knew it could shift the balance. The question was, how to orchestrate the confrontation so that neither of them could walk away without me forcing the next step? I stayed up half the night plotting that moment, not knowing it would arrive under far more volatile circumstances than I had planned. Shall I write the next chapter? I barely slept that night, the glow of my phone screen casting restless shadows across my walls as I rearranged the plan in my head again and again. The trick would be to catch him in a situation where walking away wasn't possible, and ideally with Ivan just close enough to accidentally overhear. My best shot was the morning prep window, right after deliveries arrived, when all hands were inside, but we hadn't opened yet. By some cruel blessing of timing, the next day delivered exactly that. But with an added twist, I couldn't have scripted. We'd just received a shipment of specialty flour we'd been waiting on for weeks, and Ivan was unpacking it at the counter while I portioned dough. The front bell chimed, surprising before opening, and in walked a woman I vaguely recognized from the neighborhood business council. She was holding a clipboard and one of those heavy padded envelopes. "Delivery for the bakery owner," she announced brightly. Without missing a beat, he stepped forward from the back, wiping his hands theatrically. "That's me," he said. He didn't even glance at me. Something in my chest clenched, but I forced myself to stay utterly still, arranging my face into polite neutrality. The woman smiled and handed him the envelope. "Congrats again on the feature. They wanted you to approve the copy before it goes to print." Feature? Copy? My pulse jumped. He slit the envelope and slid out a neatly folded set of pages, the bold headline proclaiming, From humble beginnings, how one man built the town's favorite bakery. The rest was a blur of beautifully typeset lies. His childhood fascination with baking, his innovative approach to traditional recipes, his lone struggle to keep the shop open. My name appeared once in a line about occasional assistance from family. The room spun, but I heard it, quiety, exactly as I'd hoped. Ivan's mutter, "That's not how it went." And that was my opening. I dried my hands deliberately and walked over, placing myself at the corner of the counter so both were within arm's reach. "Interesting read," I said evenly, eyes locked on him. "Maybe when you approve the copy, you can correct the part where you erase the actual family who built this bakery, the recipes you passed off as yours, and the fact that I run, or used to run, every customer interaction we've ever had online." He tried to laugh, but Ivan's frown was fixed on him now. "You've got this wrong," he started, but I pulled out my phone and tapped the first screenshot from Nina. The crisp green bubble popped up, undeniable. She stepped back. The color drained from his face. He flicked his eyes between me, Ivan, and the business council woman, clearly calculating his next move. But in that moment, I realized I hadn't just caught him. I had him cornered in a way that could not be smoothed over without public concession. The question was, would he double down or crumble? Shall I write the next chapter? He didn't crumble, not at first. A vein at his temple started to pulse, but he smoothed his expression into that maddening half-smile, the one he used when turning an accusation into a misunderstanding. "Ivan," he laughed lightly, "she's upset. You know how things get when families mix business and stress." But Ivan didn't nod along. He folded his strong, flour-dusted arms across his chest, eyes narrowing. "I also know who taught who to bake in this shop," he said quietly. "And I know your grandmother had nothing to do with that braid." Silence bloomed heavy in the room. The councilwoman's gaze flicked from me to him, sensing tension she couldn't pretend wasn't there. I kept my voice low, steady, but each word landed like a nail. "You locked me out of the accounts. You spread a false story to staff and to my mother, telling them I stepped back. You deleted my name from posts about family recipes." I slid my finger across my phone, revealing each screenshot, each betrayal. "Do you deny these messages came from you?" His mouth opened, shut. He glanced at the councilwoman, a witness he couldn't afford to alienate, and then back at Ivan, who still hadn't moved. "I may have misphrased a few things," he said finally. "It was all for the sake of clarity. And look, I was going to give you the passwords back once things stabilized." "Once I'd been written out completely, you mean?" I cut in. His jaw tightened. This is exactly the kind of dramatics I was trying to head off. Our brand needs one coherent voice. We can't air personal drama to customers. It would have been a neat pivot if Ivan hadn't spoken again. "Your brand? This shop belonged to her family before you set foot in it. The only coherent voice around here that matters is the truth." For the first time, I saw something crack in him, a flash of uncertainty, like the ground had shifted an inch beneath his feet. The councilwoman cleared her throat delicately and murmured, "Perhaps you two should resolve this before the feature goes live. I'll let the magazine know revisions are needed." She left with the envelope in hand, her step brisk, and the air seemed to close in around the three of us. That was when I decided the argument wasn't enough. I needed action that couldn't be walked back, a reclaiming of my role that didn't rely on his permission at all. And I already had the first step in mind, going straight to the platforms themselves to recover what he'd taken. But I wasn't prepared for how violently he'd react when he realized my plan. Shall I write the next chapter? The storm hit less than 24 hours later. I'd stayed up half the night combing through platform recovery protocols, sending documentation to Instagram and Facebook. My business emails still had traces in the accounts, enough to prove my original ownership. It wasn't instant, but by morning I'd received the first tentative victory. A security message from Facebook saying they were reviewing admin privileges and would notify me of changes. I didn't breathe a word to him. I just came in, tied my apron, and started my shift like nothing had happened. But by mid-afternoon, as the front door chimed for the 1,000th time, I saw the flicker in his face. The alert must have arrived on his phone. At first he kept it cool, even cordial, until the last customer left. Then he shut the door, snapped the lock, and walked briskly toward me behind the counter. "What did you do?" His voice was quiet, but it had an edge that made the hairs on my arms prickle. I set down the spatula in my hand. "I submitted proof to Facebook that I was the original admin and content creator. They're reviewing. You went behind my back to sabotage everything I've been protecting?" I almost laughed. The inversion was so blatant it bordered on absurd. "Protecting? You changed passwords. You lied to staff. You staged interviews erasing my family." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "Listen to me. You think customers care about whose grandmother made what? They care about the story I tell. One seamless front. You airing dirty laundry will destroy years of goodwill." There it was again. My fight for the bakery twisted into reckless image-killing hysteria. But this time, my pulse stayed steady. "The only image I'm interested in protecting," I said, "is the truth. And if that truth makes you look bad, that's on you." His jaw clicked as he clenched it. But before he could respond, Ivan emerged from the back, a flour streak still across his apron. "Everything all right out here?" he asked, gaze moving between us. "Fine," he said quickly, forcing a thin smile. "Just a business disagreement." I met Ivan's eyes over his shoulder. No words exchanged, but I knew he understood the stakes now. For all his control over passwords and posts, the cracks in his image were widening, and witnesses were already staring through them. That night, as I locked my own apartment door, I saw the fresh Facebook notification light up. "You have been reinstated as group admin." I felt the burn of relief and the thump of anticipation. This would bring on a counterattack, and something told me his next move wouldn't be subtle. Shall I write the next chapter? I didn't have to wait long. The very next morning, a new post appeared on the bakery's Instagram. My stomach twisted the second I saw the thumbnail. A wide shot of him in front of the shop counter, all smiles, holding up a loaf of bread like a trophy. The caption was pure theater. "Change can be hard, but it's how we grow. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for the good of the business, even if it upsets family. We'll always love each other, but the bakery comes first." He tagged local journalists, food bloggers, even the business council. The subtext wasn't subtle. I was the upset, unreasonable obstacle he'd heroically overcome. And the flood of comments came just as quickly. Half customers praising his dedication, the other half confused, asking if I was still working there. I didn't respond publicly. Not yet. Instead, I spent the morning compiling the screenshots from Nina, the recovered admin rights, the unauthorized interviews, the deleted mentions of me in past posts, creating a neat, chronological package. I knew there would be no going back after this, so every choice had to be deliberate. By late morning, a text buzzed in from my mom. "What's going on online? He says you're making trouble." That one hurt more than I wanted to admit. Even now, even after everything, she was starting from his version. For a moment, I wondered if I was about to blow up my relationship with her entirely. But then I reminded myself, the bakery's history disappearing would be worse. When I finally walked into the shop, the air felt different. Customer smiles were tighter, cautious, some almost pitying. Behind the counter, he looked up with the bland expression of someone braced for a fight, but determined to pretend otherwise. "We need to talk," I said, loud enough for the customers at nearby tables to hear. He motioned toward the back, but I shook my head. "Here, now." Ivan drifted out from the kitchen, a dish towel in his hand, sensing the weight in my voice. I placed my phone face up on the counter, the screen displaying the group chat snippet where he'd said I'd stepped back. Then I swiped the false interview about his grandmother, the deleted captions, the admin reinstatement notice. "This," I said clearly, "is the truth. You've been lying to staff, to my mother, and to our customers. You can retract and correct it now, or I will." Every eye was on us. He tried to smirk, but it faltered under the collective gaze. "This is ridiculous. You're making a spectacle," he muttered. I kept my voice calm. "No, I'm making a correction." He glanced at the customers, at Ivan, at the camera lens of someone's phone clearly recording, and in that moment, I saw his calculation change, self-preservation overtaking control. "I may have overstated my role in certain things," he said carefully. "Perhaps a public clarification is warranted." It wasn't an apology, but it was the first step in forcing the truth out of his mouth, and I knew exactly how to make sure he followed through. "Shall I write the next chapter?" I didn't trust his sudden shift for a second. I'd seen him promise things before, only to twist the delivery into some half measure that kept him on top. This time, I was going to make it impossible for him to wriggle free. The customers in the front were still pretending to sip coffee, ears tilted toward us, so I leaned in and said, "Great, let's do it now, Liv." His brow furrowed. "Now?" "Yes," I said. "Post to Instagram and Facebook, from the official accounts, while we stand here, with Ivan and our customers watching." Ivan crossed his arms, nodding slowly. That would set things straight quickly. His jaw worked silently for a few seconds before he pulled out his phone. I watched every swipe with hawk-eyed focus, making sure he really was in the official account. I dictated deliberately, so there was no chance he'd slide in some PR version of events. To our community. In recent posts and interviews, I spoke inaccurately about the origins of our recipes and leadership of the bakery. The recipes, brand stories, and online community you've enjoyed were created and maintained by my name, whose family founded this bakery. I regret not making that clear sooner, and I thank her for preserving our history. He typed stiffly, cheeks tight. The moment he tapped post, I felt a knot deep in my chest start to loosen. Customers glanced at each other, murmuring. Someone clapped quietly near the coffee station. He put his phone down like it weighed 100 pounds. "Satisfied?" he asked coldly. "Not completely," I said, keeping my voice level. "The passwords remain in my control from now on, and any public statement goes through both of us. If you change them again without my consent, I won't just show proof to the customers. I'll take it to the press you like so much." His eyes flickered, just for a second, before the mask snapped back on. "Fine." Ivan gave me a small, approving nod as he passed by to take a loaf out of the oven, as if to say, "Finally." Walking home that night, I knew he wouldn't forgive me for forcing him into submission so publicly. But I also knew this. He'd think twice before trying to erase me again. Still, part of me wondered, was this truly the end of his attempts to control the story, or just the pause before he found a subtler way? Shall I write the next chapter?